as evidenced by the cuticle of the hairs. You do have different types of hairs. The most common types of hairs are guard hairs and what's called under hairs. Guard hairs form the outer coat of the animal. They tend to be long hairs. Everything's going to be relative to the next group, so longer than the under hairs. They tend to be coarser. And very often not as abundant as the under hairs. So they're larger, they're coarser, not necessarily as abundant. These are the ones that are usually making contact with the physical environment. Under hairs are shorter, finer in texture. Depending on the animal, they can be extremely abundant compared to the outer guard hair. There's two basic kinds of under hairs. There's wool and there's fur. And the big difference in them is simply what is the growth pattern. So if it's designated as wool, it's an under hair that continually grows. Whereas if it's designated as fur, it has definitive growth. It will grow to a certain length and then it's going to stop growing. We can take hairs and modify them into other structures, like some guard hairs are modified into the spines of the porcupine. Many other animals throughout North America and other parts of the world use spiny hairs. Those are usually modified guard hairs. Oops, forgot to mention the third major type is vibrissae. These are long, stiff, well innervated at the base. They're really tactile receptors. So the old whiskers. But I throw this diagram up of a gray fox because it illustrates the idea that you have vibrissae in multiple places on the head of the animal. So we're all used to the cartoons, we're all used to Mickey Mouse, and they're all coming out the side like that. All right? But in reality, mammals have vibrissae in different places. So you have some here on the sides of the lower jaw, you have some in the middle of the lower jaw, over here in the cheek area. These, the moustachial ones, those are the ones that people are used to seeing in the cartoons. But then you also have some above the eye, the superciliary ones. So we have vibrissae, long, stiff, well innervated at the base. They act as tactile receptors, but they're not restricted to one location. Different mammals will have them in different places, often in multiple places. I'll pass this box around. It's just got some woodchuck fur. And if you look at it closely, my eyes can't do it anymore, but you should be able to identify the guard hairs versus the under hairs in that fur. All right. Functions of hair. A lot of them are very similar to the functions of feathers in birds. So your primary one is going to be insulation, right? Keeping that animal warm. You also get some physical protection. What rubs up against the environment is not the skin. Instead, it is this dead hair. Camouflage and communication, just as in the bird. And then we do have sensory functions as well. And remember, we could have sensory functions with certain feathers, like the phyloplumes in the birds. So feathers and hairs are really analogous in the sense that they have very similar functions in these two groups of animals, even though they were evolved independently. All right, glands. So again, derived from the epidermis. Mammals have more kinds of epidermal glands than any of the other groups, some of which are unique to the mammals, and some of which are just more common in the mammals than other groups. What are these? Well, sebaceous glands. A lot of times these are very simple in structure. If you look at them from cross-section, they might be tubular, like that. Perhaps they'll be somewhat sac-like in nature. And they open into a hair follicle, so not onto the surface of the normal epidermis, but open into the hair follicle itself. The product of these glands is called sebum. There's a lot of junk in there. There's fats, cholesterol, protein, inorganic salts. What's it do? What's the function? Well, the major function appears to be helping to keep the hairs from becoming dry and brittle. So primarily keeping the hairs from becoming dry and brittle, but those secretions also can be spread over the skin to a certain degree. And you remember the outer layer of your skin consists of dead cells. So this is another way of keeping your skin a little bit more supple and potentially decreasing evaporative water loss, because now you have a somewhat oily, greasy substance over the surface between the water in your body and the outside world. So keeps those hairs from becoming dry and brittle, probably helps the skin do the same, probably helps contribute to water balance. Sweat glands. Okay, we all know intuitively sweat glands are going to be important in controlling our body temperature in warm environments. Now, not all mammals have sweat glands. In those that do, those glands are not necessarily found evenly spread throughout the body or even on certain parts of the body. But true sweat glands here are mammalian. There is no other group of vertebrates that has a sweat gland. So not all mammals have them, and they're not evenly distributed, but it is a truly mammalian characteristic because nobody else has evolved sweat glands. These tend to be long coiled tubes, so that if you make a cross section, right, think of that as a coiled tube in 3 dimensions. If you make a cross section of it, you're going to get a bunch of oval and round shapes, as every time that knife went through the wax containing that gland, it cut through that tube. These glands, in contrast to the sebaceous glands, open onto the surface of the skin, surface of the epidermis. Oh, there it is. Oh, didn't bring it. So here's a standard view of a hair follicle. You can see it coming down, use the little dermal papilla there. Right? But right here at eye, this is showing you your sac-like sebaceous gland that is emptying into the hair follicle itself. Then over here, they're trying to give you the idea of your highly coiled sweat gland that is emptying out onto the surface of the epidermis. Now, in reality, if we sliced through that, this is what we would be seeing. So all of these little circles right here, oval-shaped things, are nothing more than slicing through that highly coiled sweat gland. You can see other ones in there as well. There's my erector pili muscle. Scent glands, highly variable in structure, highly variable in location, highly variable in derivation. In other words, it could be a modified sebaceous gland, it could be a modified sweat gland, it could be a gland that was just evolved for that particular purpose. So I'm lumping them together not because of any particular structure, but I'm lumping them together because of their function, which is to manufacture a smelly substance that can be used to communicate with others of its kind. Now, in terms of location, again, just keep in mind that it can be highly variable, so that, you know, we all know about the anal glands of skunks, right? An epidermal derivative. But deer have metatarsal glands down on their legs. Bats have pararhinal glands, which are along the snout on either side. Shrews have a flank gland right about there. Right? So the location of these things just varies tremendously among the mammals. Highly variable. Mammary glands, right, they're a little more complex. You have a system of tubes or ducts, so you can think of starting at the teat or at the nipple and then working your way inward, and you're going to have branching. Tubes coming out and then just branching to form the bulk of the mammary gland. And the amount of branching just depends upon the age of the female, so there's a certain amount that's present at birth, there's more that occurs at the time of puberty, and there's even more that occurs at the time of pregnancy. Also at the time of pregnancy, what will occur is that the terminal parts of that system of branching tubes, they're going to develop little sac-like structures, analogous to the sac-like structures in the lungs, and these will be called alveoli inside the mammary gland. So you got a little bit of branching at birth, more branching occurs when estrogens start to kick in at the time of puberty, and then a huge amount of branching and causing the terminal parts of the tubes to become sac-like. That will occur in response to the hormones at the time of pregnancy. Inside, cells lining it, the alveolus, form an epithelium. It's called the secretory epithelium because those are the cells that are going to secrete milk. If you look on the outside, it looks like a spider. Right? So that is called a myoepithelial basket cell. So basket, because it sort of looks like a wicker basket surrounding the alveolus. It is a smooth muscle cell. Myoepithelial basket cell, a particular kind of smooth muscle. So, if we look at the one on the left there, you can see the myoepithelial basket cell on the outside, our secretory epithelium. We have a big space or lumen on the inside of that alveolus. That's where the milk is going to collect as it is produced by the secretory epithelium. And then this one is just, showing you the branching pattern and ending in the alveoli. All right, now what's going on?